Today I'd like to do a deep dive in why almost everyone seems to have a really difficult time getting over breakups. I've got some thoughts, but first we need to understand what the heck is going on in your body during a breakup for me to fully explain my thoughts. Now, if you haven't already read my article called The Anatomy of a Breakup on my website, exboyfriendrecovery.com, I would recommend for you to go check that out, but here's the quick crash course. I want you to take a look at this graphic. This is basically a visual representation of the many different chemicals your brain is releasing, basically the neurochemistry of what's going on inside of your body at the beginning of a relationship. Now, I want you to take special note of how dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin are really high. And for your reference, dopamine basically mediates pleasure, affects motor skills, improves memory. Norepinephrine triggers the release of glucose into the bloodstream and increases blood pressure, heart rate, mental awareness, respiratory rate, basically prepares fight or flight responses. And serotonin is basically a mood balancer. It's going to regulate your appetite, aid in digestion, regulate sleep, things of that nature. So these three chemicals are often why the honeymoon period is so potent. But let's take a look at what happens to those chemicals in the middle of a relationship. So here you're going to notice that dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin have come down, but oxytocin, also known as the cuddle hormone, and vasopressin, it inspires pair bonding. It's really that pair bonding aspect that's of note. You know, the honeymoon period kind of wears off, everything's not sunshine and rainbows anymore, but you feel stronger together as a couple. You're bonding together as a pair. But the real horror doesn't really begin until the breakup occurs. Here's a look at the neurochemistry of your body during a breakup. Basically, all chemicals go way down with the exception of cortisol. And cortisol is why I believe so many people struggle with breakups. Cortisol, of course, is basically known as the stress hormone. And it's going to be at the vanguard of pretty much every crazy behavior that you're experiencing post-breakup. You know, lack of motivation, fatigue, mood swings, memory problems, inability to concentrate, sleep problems, loss of appetite. All of these have their issues rooted in the fact that your cortisol is really high. In fact, last week I recently filmed a video talking about cortisol during the no contact rule. And some of the findings that I found when I was researching that video are quite relevant to the discussion that we're having right now. I stumbled across this website called Health Quotient, and I saw this quote by Dr. Jamie Lee. It can take 3 to 4 hours for your cortisol levels to return to normal after a stress response, you know, like an argument or a high stakes meeting. But if your levels have been high for some time, it can take up to 6 months to balance them out. So essentially my argument is simple. If your cortisol stays at an elevated rate, it's going to be so much more difficult for you to get over a breakup. I believe that going through a breakup in today's landscape makes life so much more difficult than it actually needs to be. And to prove that point, I'd like to take a look at this beautiful landscape. So we have one piece of this very complicated puzzle, cortisol. But the other piece of the puzzle that is going to be important for this discussion is understanding our environment. And for that, we're going to look at some statistics from Tech Jury. So there are 4.76 billion, with a B, social media users, which are 59.4% of the entire world's population. So basically 60% of the people you see walking around are connected on social media. Now, the average user of social media will spend about 2.5 hours a day on it. In fact, teens showed an increase in their daily screen time from 7 hours and 22 minutes to 8 hours and 39 minutes. 26% of these social media platform users are going to be aged between, well, the ages of 18 and 29, and half of our time on our phones in 2022 is basically reserved for social media. So here's why I believe that the average client that comes through our program has such a difficult time getting over a breakup. They can't help themselves from checking up on their ex on social media. And guess what happens every single time that they do check up on their ex on social media? Well, those cortisol levels continue to stay in that elevated state. They're spying on their ex. So let's go through a fun little thought experiment. Let's say that it's day 7 post-breakup. Your cortisol levels have finally begun to dissipate. They're coming down. but there's a gnawing feeling inside. You just have to find out what your ex is up to. So you log on to Facebook or Instagram or what have you. You go to their profile and see something that triggers you. All of a sudden, your cortisol levels that were beginning to dissipate spike back up. Now this process repeats over and over and over again until your body gets used to those cortisol levels being in that elevated state. And social media doesn't do you any favors. So the way the Facebook algorithm works is it's basically designed to put you in front of content that is going to make you stay on the platform as long as humanly possible. It's how YouTube works. They're going to suggest videos that get you to stick to the platform. So if you're on Facebook, for example, and you're checking your ex's profile again and again and again, guess whose content in your feed is going to come up first? Your ex, making it much more difficult for those cortisol levels to begin to dissipate. It is literally the first thing you see when you turn your phone on, when you log into Facebook or Instagram, and guess what? It's impossible to escape from that, especially if you have your notifications on Facebook turned on. Guess what happens when they post a new post? Ding! You're notified. You come back. Cortisol levels get raised. It is an impossible situation to escape from. And what makes this so difficult and devious is that it is a slow-moving process. You know, it's okay and normal for you to have cortisol levels spike every once in a while. It's normal after a breakup to get triggered by something, but because of social media, because of the way the algorithms work and putting the controversial content at the top because they know it's what you're going to engage with, it makes it so much more difficult to get over an ex. So, what's the fix? What's the best way to handle elevated cortisol levels? Well, are you familiar with my holy trinity concept? If not, here's a quick summary. Basically, it's all about dividing your life up into health, wealth, and relationships. Now, after doing this for 10 years, I've observed that there's an interesting synergistic principle at work between these three components. If you divide your life up in this way, you'll notice that what affects one positively will also affect the others positively. Vice versa is also true. What affects one negatively will affect the others negatively. We see this play out in breakups all the time. You know, you go through a breakup, but your wealth takes a hit because you stop showing up to work and your boss yells at you, which of course makes you more depressed, which you stop working out, which your health takes a hit. But that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is if you actually work on the stuff opposite to your relationship, your wealth, your health, it can have a positive synergistic aspect in your relationships, not just with your ex, but other people that might find you attractive or other people that you're close with. So the single biggest mistake that I see people making is after a breakup, they focus all of their energies into the one area they're not supposed to be focusing, their ex. They obsess about them, they think about them, they do things to try to win them back. Yet the irony is that the best way to win an ex back is actually to get over them first. And if you don't believe me, just go to my website and look at the success story interviews I've done with hundreds of different people, and all of them repeat the same concept over and over again. It's about self-care over caring for an ex. Do yourself a favor. Focus on the other aspects outside of your ex so that you stop prolonging this breakup. It doesn't need to be as painful as it is right now.